Playing the piano or something, huh?
Oh, it's Peggy's piano.
Nice. Little background music never hurts. Never hurts. All right, so, Sari,
Yes.
I'm going to make you. I'm going to make you the. 1 second. I'm going to make you the host, and I'm going to say goodbye.
Okay. Don't say goodbye. Just say shalom.
Bye-bye. Harvey and Elena saying goodbye.
Let's see. And
I'm saying goodbye.
All right.
Sherry,
Later out.
going to be the host, and I'm going to say goodbye, everyone.
Okay. So,
Good night.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
So,
so 1 million one bookers are still here, though. Are you guys staying, Harvey?
no, we're leaving, but not here. There we go.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, the rest of us are here. That's really great. I see Harriet. I see Jim. I see Helen and Andrea. Jonathan, do you have power? Jonathan is.
He told me that he can hear, but he can't participate by speaking.
Okay, great.
But he can hear and see us.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
I see that we have Charlotte and
Where's Charlotte?
Charlotte's here. I see Charlotte, but I don't know if she can talk either.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
absolutely.
We can. We don't see you, but we can definitely.
Oh, you can't see me?
No, you have to.
You have to
on your video camera.
No, on the big shot on the right.
Click on video camera at the top.
Right side, right.
On your bar on the bottom of the screen, there's a place where. There you go.
There I go.
Yep, you're on. Excellent.
Okay, good.
And Andrea, we already worked on with her, but Adina, where's your video? Are you there,
Can't see
Adina?
you.
Can you click on your video camera at the bottom of the bar?
or somewhere. Depends on what device you're using.
Yeah, on the iPad, it's at the top. Adina, can you hear us? I guess she can't participate.
She's on. She must be muted. Maybe she'll come on later. She's usually pretty good.
Okay.
Who's this person? No mic.
I see Andrea's name, but I don't see her. Is
She
she?
can't. She
I'm
can't.
here. I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay.
But we just can't see her. Okay, we're here.
But who is this person? No mic. Anybody? And there's a phone. Marcia, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great. Okay, good. All right. So I think we're ready to start. And I know that Jim has a lot to say about this book. So I'm going to call on Jim first.
Oh, aren't I lucky? Okay. So it's very obvious and clear that reading this book, there was a certain amount of material in it that was already familiar to us from other books that we have read. And it might have been a little hard to have to read the same material again. But it did approach the whole story from a fresh topic, which was faithful decisions and demonstrations of leadership. Really highlighted and focused that. And I thought that that was very valuable. And then, and I learned things about each of the four leaders who was profiled that I hadn't realized before. In the case of Ben Gurion, I had read it, but I didn't really, this book goes into much more detail about the skepticism and opposition that General George Catlett Marshall imposed in terms of the United States' reception to the idea of declaring a Jewish state. It really was pretty dramatic how the US government, as represented at that point by Marshall, really was throwing nails in front of the truck of Israeli independence. And that was pretty remarkable how Ben Gurion kept going, even despite that. I was surprised to realize that Rabin always saw the West Bank as bargaining chips to be bargained away in a peace deal. He never saw them as essential parts of the land of Israel that needed to be retained, or at least most of it as essential parts that needed to be retained. Sharon, who was the architect of the settlements, I was surprised to find out, it really wasn't clear to me, he wasn't into settlements for their own sake or the annexation of territory to enhance the size of Israel for its own sake. He just was especially concerned about security. And when he became prime minister, they document how he underwent a very strong change of attitude. To him, whatever was essential to guarantee the security of the state of Israel was what needed to be done. And settlements were a means, not an end. So that was very interesting to learn. So after they presented all these people, and it was interesting to hear them, even if it was sometimes for a second time, about their lives and their decisions, they then go into a presentation of the implications of these lessons for today. And I don't think that they're arguing that Israel is in danger of falling off a cliff if nothing happens. But they are trying to make a point that these leaders saw the consequences of inaction and they acted. And the inaction that Ross and McCoskey are concerned about is allowing the West Bank to become so settled in all parts so intensively by so many people that it becomes harder and harder and harder to achieve some kind of separation from the vast majority of the Palestinians in the West Bank. And by the way, that was another thing that was kind of surprising to me, to really understand that Begin, because of his liberal political values, was ready to offer all of the Arabs who were Palestinians who were captured in 1967 full Israeli citizenship. That was an interesting thing to find. But anyway, so what they're saying is that the facts on the ground are accreting year after year. And if this goes on much longer, it's not going to be possible to retain both the Jewish and democratic, or either the Jewish or democratic character of the state. And they therefore see a drift in a direction that is dangerous. And they're urging that Israel could have a leader who would guide them towards some kind of, even if it's unilateral, some kind of arrangement that would protect Israel from the demographic problem and the loss of its democratic character because of having to rule over these people. If you remember Rabin, one of the things that pushed Rabin towards wanting to make peace, even with the PLO, which he totally completely 100% detested and mistrusted, was because the job of ruling over an occupation was damaging the fiber, the moral fiber, and the morale of the army that he was so dedicated to. He saw it actually being injured and damaged by that experience, and he didn't want it to continue. So they're asking for somebody to come and do that if possible. One thing that there's a lot of similarities between this book and Micha Goodman's book, which we read. And one of the similarities is that both Micha Goodman and Ross and McCoskey argue that even if they're going to make some kind of agreement or some plan to divorce from the Palestinians or from a large number of the Palestinians, they need to retain security control over the Jordan River Valley. And Ehud Barak, former prime minister from the Labor Party, vehemently disagrees with that idea, and he wrote a very intense article in an Israeli newspaper about it that I read. But both McCoskey and Ross and Micha Goodman both say that something like that needs to continue to happen. that there needs to be some kind of security presence in the Jordan Valley that would outlive any settlement or arrangement that would divorce Israel and the Palestinians. So it was interesting to me that he and Micha Goodman are heading in the same direction in terms of what kinds of things need to happen in their view. And this book specifically is looking for a leader who's going to do that. And there was one last thing, and that is that, well, I don't know what that is, so I'll move on. I'll let you guys move on.
Thank you. That certainly covered a lot of area. Very good. Okay, Harriet, you're on the top of my board. So.
Oh, I'm not sure I want to be next. Well, I have a problem with this book. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the problem is that I just find it very, very difficult to read about diplomatic meetings. I just kept glazing over every time they said that they got together at Camp David, or they got together here, or got together there, and this one presents one position, the other presents another position. Then they go back and talk to people and they modify their positions. And I just, I couldn't take too much of it at once. And moreover, it's my problem. I don't retain it because it doesn't, for me, it just doesn't attach to any reality that I can identify.
You have a problem
It's a
with
lot
banal.
of-
You have a problem with banal retention. That's what I'm.
So I felt that the authors needed what Tom Wolfe had. They needed a literary coach. You remember Tom Wolfe told us that he went to this woman who was really a novelist, and she helped him form his book so that it became his story, and so forth and so forth. Well, this wouldn't need quite the same treatment. But as I plowed through chapter after chapter, I found their style to be indistinguishable one from the other, you know, in dealing with these four leaders. And I think I did not come out with a clearer differentiation between them than I had when I went in. So I just felt it was kind of, I hate to use this word, pedestrian prose, but I just, I couldn't get past the style of presentation to really grasp the differences and similarities. I think I would have needed to know more history in order to understand how what they were saying was different from what Micha Goodman was saying or what the various other people were saying. It just gets kind of overwhelming to read about diplomatic meeting after diplomatic meeting after diplomatic meeting, and meanwhile, things continue to deteriorate on the ground. And so I didn't find this book too hopeful in its entirety, because it's like talk. We've been talking about these things for decades. And what is really going to make a difference? I would like, I know they presented their view in the final chapter, and I've heard these views before, but what is, you know, maybe a different kind of leader is needed than the one that Ross and Mikovsky are talking about. This may seem irrelevant, but I was just reading an article today about the pandemic and about how the countries with women leaders seem to have done a lot better than the other countries in really containing things and organizing things and so forth. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? I'm not saying that's what Israel needs, because we already had Golda Meir and that didn't produce the change that we want necessarily, but maybe different kinds of leadership than this kind of technocratic diplomacy that we see a lot of these people engaging in needs to happen to really bring about change on the ground. I don't have any answers, but I just got overwhelmed by the rhetoric. So I cannot say that I found a path to greater enlightenment from this book, although I think they gave sort of a fair, equitable treatment to all four men, who are very different people. And I just felt they're trying one avenue, the diplomatic avenue, over and over and over. And we really haven't seen a breakthrough on that avenue. We've seen a lot of, we have seen some breakthroughs, like when, well, I won't go into that, but each one has then produced kind of a reaction to the reaction. And can we really say we're further along now toward finding any kind of long-term solution? So I didn't find it in the long run a very hopeful book, although they presented a lot of positive ideas, because when you look back on all the talks that all four of these men have been involved in. But I do want to say something about what Jim said about George Marshall. I had actually read that elsewhere that he didn't have a very positive view also about Jewish immigration after the Holocaust or anything like that, that he was a stumbling block along the way, although he had so many other fine qualities. So it just seems that he just had that negative attitude, not only toward a Jewish state, but even toward Jewish immigration. I think he was consistent in his negativity across several topics. So I think I'll yield the floor to someone who has a more positive view of the prose in the book.
Okay, thank you, Harriet. That was quite comprehensive, and we'll see if the next person does have a more positive view. And so, Charlotte,
Okay.
tell us what you think.
Are you calling me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate what Harriet said, because during the vast pages that went back and forth, for example, about Begin and Sadat, all these intricate details, I must admit, I started skipping. But what I really appreciated about the book were the life descriptions, particularly the early lives of these men. They were inextricably bound to Israel from the time they were born. There was no question in my mind that they would be leaders because of their nurturance and because of the settings in which they were born. Every single one of them. And what I got from Ben-Gurion, and I thought, oh my God, would there have been a state of Israel without Ben-Gurion? I really don't know. I had no idea about, for example, all the back and forth when they were going to declare a state. I had no idea that that was such a big deal and that there was a controversy about it. I didn't know that. All I knew was that they declared a state. And I thought, great, but I didn't know how ill-prepared they were, how decades later, Rabin would say how ill-prepared they were, and all the intricate details that Ben-Gurion felt that as soon as the war started, he had two armies. He had the leftovers from the British Army, and he had a citizen army made up of Holocaust survivors and God knows what, completely ill-prepared, the enormous sacrifices of everybody. It was incredible. And they were such visionaries, particularly Ben-Gurion, how much he tried for immigration before the Holocaust. He knew, unlike the Americans, whom he declared passive, et cetera, whom he declared so afraid of anti-Semitism and so forth and so on. It was the Israelis, after all, who against all odds did the illegal immigration to Israel. And they saved over 100,000. So, I mean, there were all kinds of things in the book that I was completely unaware of. I thought what they tried to do, and I think it would have been very helpful to me because I figure I know about the history, but if they had, even in the beginning, a chronological thing about all the wars, the 1936 riots, the Declaration, the Sinai, the whatever. These were pivotal points. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. But what he tried to do, I thought, was compare and contrast, for example, Ben Gurion and Begin, that even though they were Ashkenazi Jews, they weren't born in Israel, they had completely different backgrounds. Begin, after all, was in a sense a Holocaust survivor. His family died in the Holocaust, and he was more of an ideologue. In comparison to Ben Gurion, who from a very early age was back and forth and realized that Israel needed a great power. So what did he do? He put on a turban, he went to Turkey, he studied law. Then he decided, okay, England's the answer. The Balfour Declaration, Weitzman, and they rivaled back and forth. Weitzman was much more popular in the United States than Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion was just the head of the Labor Party before the state of Israel. He was nothing. Weitzman, everybody knew, great hero. So it all changed after the state was announced. And he was such a visionary, Ben Gurion. Imagine him realizing that Jews would come from the Soviet Union. I mean, there was a little thing and a little anecdote in the book. De Gaulle asked, where are they coming from? Oh, he said, the Soviets will fall and we'll get the immigration from the Soviets. Well, okay. So I thought the contrast that this book tried to do between these two people who were born, as Ashkenazi Jews with different backgrounds, and then these two Sabras, was very, very interesting. And of course, Rabin, from a very, very early age, he was really a great, great leader, much different than Sharon. So there was a great contrast, I thought, between Rabin and Sharon, but all of them really modified their positions. For Begin, for example, there were a lot of pivotal points. One was the fact that for Ben Gurion, when he took down that ship, Adelina, that there could be not two militias. There couldn't be an Irgun and a Lehi, and then, the Palmach and the Haganah. No, they had to have one military, not two. So there were certain pivots that I think that they mentioned in the book that were extremely important. The Lazaroff affair, for example. There were lots of things. I thought that the book was stronger, perhaps, describing for me at least, Ben Gurion and Begin, than Rabin and Sharon. But I think it's interesting. I didn't realize that when Begin, when he was negotiating with Sadat about the Sinai, there was such an enormous importance about the settlements in the northern part of the Sinai. I had no idea. And apparently this was a sticking point. This was really a sticking point. And they went back and forth. There were about at least 10 pages about the settlements in the Sinai. It was amazing to me. I had no idea. Okay, so then they give up the Sinai. There's been peace, so-called, for 40 years. And the other thing is that the Middle East changes, right? All the time. When they talked about what was going on then, as far as what was going on in the Middle East, it doesn't exist anymore. 2 decades ago, Syria was no problem, except for the Golan Heights. Not a problem at all. Now, of course, Iran is there. So it changes. And now what are they talking about? We have Trump, and he declared that, okay, the settlements in the West Bank, we're going to annex them. Whoever heard of that? No one. They tried to have some kind of a compromise about the West Bank, but no one ever used that word. They knew it would be inflammatory. So what does Trump do for his own purposes in order to, get his base and the evangelists on board? He declares that, annexing. Pompeo goes there and says, no, soft on that. So the situation changes all the time. Anyway, I like the book, but as I said, I could appreciate what Harriet said, and I didn't take it as a book to illustrate a solution to what's going on in Israel at all. I really appreciated their depictions of these men, because unlike our leaders in the United States, when men decide now what they're going to do at the age of 20, 21, 22, they sit down, they have a whatever. These men, from the time they were born, Israel. And that's what really struck me about this, that their lives were all devoted to the state of Israel. As everyone, and everyone who's lived there for decades, including my relatives, they don't think of themselves so much as individuals apart from Israel. Their lives are inextricably bound with Israel in every single way. It touches them enormously. Our lives now are touched enormously by the pandemic and by what the government does. However, if you've been in Israel for decades, you mark your life with what's happened in Israel. So I think that's one of the lessons of the leaders here. It's not that they decided to be leaders. They were born leaders.
That's a great ending sentence. They should have used that in the book to end the book. It would have been perfect. Very nice. Thank you. Helen. You have to unmute. We have to unmute you. Okay. Wait.
Unmute.
Okay. Can you? No, we don't hear you. Unmute yourself.
Mute. I did. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I hit a bunch of things. Anyway, I liked the book a lot more than I thought I was going to, frankly. And partly, Harriet, you and I are two different. It's interesting how two different people, like the meetings didn't bother me, whereas the last book we read, the constant reference to 1 million people in the family and this and that drove me insane. So everybody's got their different reading style approaches. But what I loved is going back, as you all said, into the childhood and their development as people, which I really didn't know about. And I guess I have to say the part that disappointed me a little was at the end. I thought it was a little feeble in terms of, yes, it all led to, if nothing is done, Israel will be a country with two peoples, and unless they're able to make it two nations, to divide up, and that we will, that doing nothing is a choice too. And the whole reliance on America, I did think that they talked about that. I'll be interesting to hear their talk, Sherry, the one you sent us the link to. I signed up, and to see if they talk a little more about things in the present day. I think I related a lot to this story also because when my father went in 44, 45 to work in the DP camps and all, he went to Israel in 45, and I didn't even know that he was there for weeks. And he always was very connected to Israel and to many of the people mentioned in this book. But he always had a belief that immigrants should choose where they go, as opposed to the Jewish Agency and all saying that every Jew that got out should go to Israel. But yet they worked closely with the Haganah in Czechoslovakia and Hungary to get Jews out. And one of the things was interesting about the Holocaust survivor army, they were training boys, especially in those camps, with weapons. The Haganah was in there training them to get them out and get them to Israel. So even though they were described as not having any training, I know I read about 1,000 of them were trained for that. But in terms of the organization of the book and the reading of the book, I think it also was good to read about what America did throughout this. When he talked about all our presidents, Carter and Reagan and everybody's different, Clinton and everyone's different, the Bush's response to Israel. I thought it was a good reminder because we've been through so many. And they did not talk about Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem, which did happen before this was published, I think. I thought they would say something about that, but they didn't. But for me, I enjoyed remembering that, because I didn't know or remember how much had changed. And the other thing at the end, I guess, that I was struck by is many young members of my family are very anti Israel's position with the Palestinians. That's something we talk about, and they're not, they are not at all happy with the way they're being treated there. And so I also felt like I should ask some of them to read this if they would, to learn a little more about the history and about the intifadas and about all the things that went on to get to this point. But anyway, I guess I will leave my comments there. I'm glad I read it. I agree, Charlotte, what would have been marvelous for me would have been chronology at the beginning. That would have helped tremendously if they, in fact, if one did it as one read it, because it did jump back and forth in the different chapters about the different men. And suddenly you'd be, oh, this happened then when he was this. I think the person I learned the most about was Sharon. I had not realized all the military stuff with him, and the fact of how he changed from when he was a young man and to now, saying we could give up the settlements, whereas before he was forcing the settlements, like that also seems to me, and we are all in that older group, something that happens when you're older and can look back with some wisdom and also perhaps as what's dictated at the time. But to it, most of these leaders were able to say they made a mistake, to own it and to move on. And that is something we are sorely lacking in this country right now. So that was refreshing too. Anyway, I'll end here.
Give me 1 minute. I'm just going to get some water. You can discuss among yourselves. I'll be back in 40 seconds.
Good idea.
We will. Are any of you signing up for the Zoom talk by the authors?
Yes.
Yes, but I heard it's going to be on Facebook. Is that right?
It's
Yeah.
Is it on Facebook? I don't know. I just signed up and I thought it was a Zoom thing too.
Yeah, you can either sign up through Hello on Zoom, or you can just go to Facebook and watch it.
Yeah.
You don't have to sign up.
Right.
You can't participate, but you can watch it. And
Well, 1,000 people are signing up on, can sign up on Zoom, so I don't know how much you'll participate. But
they're pretty, they have they're structured with the comments anyway, so.
yes.
So either way is fine. So Pedro, I know what you're gonna say, but say it anyway.
Well, I'm sorry, but I did not read the book at all this time, so I have nothing to say, but I'm glad to hear everybody's comments.
Okay, who do we have here? Harriet talk. So Andrea,
Hi, I'm here.
good. Tell us, speak to us.
Okay. I was really riveted by the book, I have to say. But first, I have to say thank you to Harriet for loaning it to me, because I was in one of my binds with books and stores and all the rest of it. And also thank you to Sherry for getting me unmuted. I haven't seen yet, but I'm unmuted. Okay. So
I should thank Jonathan for giving me the book, which I then lent to Andrea.
and we
So
thank
I know you can't talk, Jonathan, but your book has been on a journey. Okay.
yeah, well, all of them they reacted as gladiators in whatever fight they had to get in, and how the fight ended out really depended on, yes, a large part of their character, but also a large part of what else was going on in the country. And so you couldn't say, oh, this was the same as that, because it wasn't. There was movement throughout. Now, what I really appreciated most, I guess, was Rabin. And then you put him next to Sharon, and there is, everybody, well, a lot of people, I guess, who worked with Sharon said he lies. And then next to him, you have Rabin, who couldn't tell a lie. So you have these two men, totally different in character. And Sharon, the first page talks about how much he eats and how he has such a problem with eating. And I thought that was remarkable to put on the first paragraph that this guy was big.
Yeah.
Okay. But his skill, it seemed to me, which it was hard to develop because he lied so much and he really infuriated so many people. But all along in his career, in his life, there were numerous people who came in to help him out and kind of tuck him into some position where his talent would be used. So I thought the Yom Kippur War was really interesting because there he was doing his military duty. I found that really fascinating. I think Yom Kippur War is fascinating. And so Sharon is a bigger than life character, and he is a character. Now, the person I liked the most was Rabin, who couldn't lie. And that's a formidable problem. Because if you can't lie, you've got to figure out what you're going to do with some truth that you know. You've got to scoot around and but whoever wrote that chapter, in one person, I really liked it the best because I think it was Dennis Ross actually, because it was so clear. It was so clearly written, and how Rabin thought about making choices. We need America. We've got to have America, and all the choices he made. And the ending, where he's assassinated, was just tragic. And Ross just delivered it straight on, and there he was. And so Rabin, who I hadn't known anything about him, I really hadn't, but I really appreciated him. I would have liked to see him in action. And I actually in that chapter, I really liked the diplomatic to and fro because, you know, the meetings that Harriet doesn't like, because Ross or whoever was writing it explained exactly what Rabin hoped to do in each of the meetings. And it was a shell game. It was chess. And he was very smart guy. And I wish that he hadn't been killed assassinated, because the country could have used him so well. And so that to me is a huge tragedy. In general, about these people who are discussed, I found that their personalities came out in whatever problems they had to solve. I mean, whatever was happening in the country at that time. And it was like going up a staircase, because first you had this problem, and then as soon as that one was solved, then you went to the next step, and then the next step, and the next step. And I think that's how I think of Israel now. This unbelievable number of issues and problems to solve step by step by step by step. And what it seems to me is happening now is what I call settler creep. And that is kind of appalling, frankly. And it seems to me as though there's a kind of, it isn't a wave, it is a creep, that something is going to happen where Israel or the settlers overtake the Palestinians. I don't know what's going to happen, but that is prefigured, I think, in the opening of the book. And so I feel there's a settler creep. So anyway, I thought it was a really wonderful choice. And again, I thank Harriet for loaning it to me. I thank Sherry for telling me how to unmute. Of course, my face is somewhere else, but I'll get my face back, I guess, in a proper place.
Well,
So
it's glad to have you. I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
So thank you very much. That's it.
I was just going to say, we're glad to have your voice, even if we don't have your face.
Oh, good.
And next to you is Adina. So Adina, can you?
So I'm very sorry. I was not able, the book was delivered to the wrong address.
Oh.
And I just found out about that, fairly recently. And I wasn't able to read the book, but given this discussion, I know I'm going to look forward to reading it. And I find myself thinking about, Charlotte was talking about how identified these leaders were with, the connection was the idea of a state of Israel, and before Israel was a state, their energy and their dedication to creating something from all their different directions. And I'm thinking about some people I know, some young people, they're in their 60s, but they were officers in the army. One person I know is like a sixth generation Israeli, and she and her husband go weekly. They are very upset by what's going on, and there are weekly protests. They work politically, and they're so frustrated by what's going on in the country right now. And after the recent union of I can't think of his name. I'm repressing his name. With the left and the right. They're just so upset. They said that people were raising a black flag with a hole in the middle. They're very, very concerned about what happens in the West Bank. What's going on, the settlements, and how it's changing the character of Israel, and they're not very unhappy with that.
Very. All right. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Very good. Jonathan, I know cannot talk, but he was very kind. He sent his notes to us and he requested that Jim read them to us on his behalf. And so now is a good time, Jim, for you to read it. I'm going to unmute you. Oh, no, you're not.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to read them.
All right.
Chance to do this.
Same side.
Jonathan found that the book had some strengths, many books have emphasized the role of the individual in world history. This book provides, arguably for the first time, comparative portraits of 4 modern Jewish leaders who made pivotal war and peace decisions. The book thereby fills a lacuna for modern Jewish and modern world history. Pretty good, huh? And they stress why they chose the 4 leaders. First of all, they all 4 faced very real consequences for Israel of their not making the decisions. And second, these 4 are of distinct, diverse backgrounds. 2 are career politicians who took on military responsibilities: Ben-Gurion, Israel's George Washington, and Menachem Begin, a firebrand revolutionary who rarely picked up a gun, but led Israel to peace with Sadat's Egypt. So those are 2 career politicians. And then 2 are career military officers who became politicians, Rabin and Sharon, but of vastly different temperaments. Rabin was a play-it-by-the-book, disciplined officer. Sharon was stubborn, contrarian, and audacious. So those are the strengths that Jonathan pointed out. He's now going to point out the weaknesses in the book. Number 1, in their introduction, the authors might have spoken why they felt that Golda Meir, Jabotinsky, Chaim Weizmann, Herzl, Sharet, and others do not rise to the level of greatness that these 4 leaders had and have chosen, that they chose to portray. But second, most seriously, this book thrives on the scenario that Israel is on the cusp of an apocalypse, and that it must quickly decide between democracy and Jewish identity in order to survive. According to Ross and Markowski, American pressure can ensure Jewish identity and democracy through pressing for a 2-state solution. I'm missing something here because I have 2 copies of the same page. Oh, wait a second. No, hold on here. This imminent here we go. Jonathan continues, this imminent eve of destruction scenario has been repeatedly prophesied since Israel took on guardianship of 1.5 million Palestinians in June 1967. It is reinforced with repeated references to a second Holocaust and to the mantra, the whole world is against the Jews, Kol ha'olam neged ha'Yehudim. Yet 53 years after 1967, Israel survives, Jewish and democratic. The authors failed to deal with an alternative hypothesis that the status quo, unpleasant as it may be the least objectionable of many less than perfect solutions. Israel's polity has been tweaked demographically with minor political arrangements as the Jewish state has transformed from a third world to a first world democracy with the highest living standards in the Middle East, especially for its Arab citizens and adjacent Palestinians. Having lived for 2,000 years as a persecuted minority, Jews are especially sensitive to the preservation and improvement of the political and economic rights for its Arab minority, while it patiently awaits an outstretched friendly hand from most Arab and Muslim leaders. So that's Jonathan's reactions to share.
Thank you, Jonathan. I wish you were able to come through directly and talk to us, but we hope that you're out there, and we're very happy to have these comments. Thank you very much. So we move on. Is there a person there behind no microphone? No. Okay, Marcia, do you have something to tell us?
I got the book late, book week, because a friend of mine ordered it through Amazon, but it didn't get here until last week. So I read about half of it. I read until Rabin, and I really like what I read about Rabin. I like the book a lot, what I've read of it. I really think that it's a well-read, very intellectually organized, and actually, even though some of it was repetitious, maybe the child in me likes to hear the same story over and over again because a new detail, a new something that was missing before. And I must say that when Rabin was murdered 25 years ago now or more, I lost hope that Israel would ever have peace. And so I am not even looking for a glimmer of peace when I read about Israel, because I think sooner or later, Israel, or maybe it may continue, you know, like wars that last 500 years. I mean, they may always be in war and continue to coexist somehow. I don't think that Israel and the Palestinians will ever come to an agreement, because I think that even if the governments come to some agreement, there's always going to be someone within the country itself who is going to dismantle whatever was established. So anyway, that's my thought about this. But I did enjoy the book very much, and I'll enjoy finishing it, I'm sure, continuing into it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Very interesting, and I'll be interested to talk to you after you do finish it. Hear your opinion.
Can I say a few things that just I didn't get a chance to say before? Are we at that point? Sherry, did you get to talk?
No.
I was just trying to say that it's always like that. That I couldn't really, given everything that's been going on, I couldn't face this book. You know, between the corona and the situation, you know, that we're having with Jim's eyes and so forth. But I just couldn't. It was just too painful for me to even continue. Not aside from all that, I just, you know, the whole situation in Israel now with the Trump administration and these last efforts, I just feel, and the world being in turmoil, I just felt like I couldn't go back and rehash this same story again, and I just couldn't. You know, I'm sure it's a good book, and I love to hear David Makovsky on WGBH. He comes on sometimes, and he's got a wonderful attitude and style. And Dennis Ross is a very respectable person. And I'll be interested to hear them tomorrow night. I'm definitely going to listen to the discussion. But I mean, it's so tragic. The whole situation was so complicated from the very beginning. I don't think that, you know, Israel, when you read it, you know, we read it. And the other thing is that we've read so much about now of the history between the biography of Ben Gurion and Jabotinsky and Golda Meir. And I just felt like, how much more can I even, you know, absorb of it so much? But as Israelis, a lot of Israelis will say, you know, it's problems on both sides. It wasn't that the Jews came in and took over the country and then mistreated the Palestinians. That wasn't how it was. You know, the Palestinians rose up right away from the beginning. First, they sold their land willingly, then they rose up. And even after Camp David, there was the Intifada. So it's this way, and then it's that way, and it's this way, and it's the two forces always at each other, and there's no right on either side. And it just seems like the leadership that we have now is obviously so horrible. and on both sides, the leadership in Israel and the leadership in our from us. And it just seems to me to be not the time to even think about it. We've got enough other problems, and so I just couldn't face it. I needed something else.
Yeah. I just wanted to add a couple of things. Charlotte mentioned about the settlements in the Sinai and how she didn't realize what a big issue it was for Begin and for Israel to give back those settlements. After that happened, someone wrote a pop song about the loss of one's home because it was in one of those settlements, and it became the most popular song on Israeli radio for months. So I just want to just mention that it really touched a very emotional chord, giving back those settlements in Israel. I just wanted to mention that. The other thing is that it was really amazing to me, things that Rabin was quoted as having said. He said that there had to be a certain time that would be ripe for making peace. He didn't want to do it the first time he was prime minister because Israel was seen too much of a vulnerable country in the neighborhood, and it needed to be a different time. And he also said that it was important that he work on making peace at that time because eventually Iran was going to develop all these military capabilities and they were going to be deploying them. He anticipated that. And, I just, was bowled over to read. This is the first time I've ever read that Rabin or anybody was talking about that back then. So that was really a mind-blowing thing. So and one last thing, in Jonathan's remarks, he says that the United States, that the book says that the United States needs to I don't know, some kind of word like push Israel to make these. He didn't say push, but he said a word like that. To induce Israel to make peace by doing these various things. And I wanted to, it didn't seem to me like that's what they were saying. They were saying that if an Israeli leader came along who really wanted to do these things, there was a lot that the United States could do to promote it. And contrary, the United States could do a lot of things to inhibit that if they went about it a different way. So I just wanted to say that I know, and I think everybody knows, that Israel is not going to be forced or pushed by the United States into doing anything that it considers important for its survival. And so the most the United States can do is to help create a climate and provide support to a leader who really wants to do these things.
I had a couple other comments.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
One was at the end when they said that Israel, 62% of Israeli Jews now define themselves as right wing. I was surprised it was so high. I guess that was one of my comments. And then two other things. I saw a documentary about Netanyahu and his rise to power. I think it was last year. And in his younger days, he was talking in front of huge crowds that were screaming about getting rid of Rabin. That it was fueling up the anti-Rabin sentiment, etc., to an extent which I had not realized how linked this whole thing was. And everybody's surprised that he was killed by a religious Jew. But I'm just saying that was just striking to me. And the third thing is I've been watching, it's a little scary, this thing on HBO, this Israeli program called Fauda. Has anybody?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. That's amazing.
Yes, it's amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Apparently that's well received both on behalf of the Arabs, many of the Arabs and Israelis. I just watched 2 episodes. I just found it. I mean, I know I'm going to watch it, but also like Sherry, I can't.
It's a lot of
It's
tension.
too
And
much
right now,
these
the things that
times.
make us tense are very difficult.
It's too painful.
I too have watched Fauda and I got through 2 and I decided I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
After I watched the second episode and I thought, no, I can't watch anymore. So I'm finished with Fauda. I did watch a lot of other Israeli, like Stitzel, I love.
Oh, I did.
Oh, yeah.
I loved Unorthodox, you know,
Yeah.
I've watched several things, but Fauda was too violent for me. And
Yeah, I might.
I've gone back and forth, but it's kind of like a drug that every so
But
often.
I did discuss it with my daughter-in-law, who was head of the, the Jewish Film Festival.
Oh.
She gave me the whole background.
Oh.
And she said that it's loved by both Israeli and Palestinians. And she talked about the doctor in it, this
woman,
doctor. And I think she's a Palestinian.
Yeah.
She's, very much loved by everybody. So I got the whole picture
my gosh.
of
Yes.
it, but I still can't watch it. So
just bringing it up.
Well, apparently the producers, or at least one of them, he was embedded when he was in the army. I mean, he was embedded in a Hamas unit in the West Bank. So it's very realistic. And
It is very realistic.
That's scary. That's why it's so scary.
It's very real for Israel today.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Yeah, I think it would be too violent for me, but Tamara, our daughter, loves it. She thought it was very good too.
I guess I feel I just want to protect myself from too many of these images because I can't deal with it very well.
Yeah.
And I would rather read or watch programs that are more peace promoting.
Right.
I just think I can't take too much of this right now because of everything else that's going on.
That's how I feel. It's too much.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure I want to hear Ross and Makovsky because, it's just, you have to really limit your intake of this stuff these days, especially, and find more time.
I think it's an unusual opportunity, and I'm hoping to.
Sherry, where is the information about it?
I sent you out it on westernstudy.org.
Oh, okay, I'll try to find it.
Yeah, I forwarded it.
He just sent it today.
Oh, today, okay.
I sent it tonight.
Okay, I haven't read my today stuff.
Check your email, and
It's in today's
you
email.
can go to Facebook.
Okay.
And find it there. Yeah.
You go to Hillel's Facebook page.
Okay.
Jim is there.
Thank you.
Okay, well, at least I think this book generated a fine discussion, and I'm glad that the group, as a group, that we read it. And yeah. So, do we have any suggestions for next time? Phaedra?
Yes, there's this book called Rebel Cinderella, and it's about this woman named Rose Pastor Stokes.
Oh, yes.
And she was an amazing woman who was a Russian immigrant, came to the United States at age 11, only had a two-year school education, and she became the wife of this very wealthy family, this Stokes, I guess, family, and she because she was kind of a socialist, she got involved, and she and her husband got involved in all these labor movements and for the poor people and everything. Eventually they did divorce, and she ended up going to prison for 10 years. But she was just the most amazing, powerful force with her husband. And it's all about this family, and it's written by this Adam Hochschild, and he himself was also he himself was also wondering if this could be a relation to him, and it reminded me a little bit of the
Nightingale Sonata.
yeah, a little bit, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about 350 pages long.
But what is the Jewish content?
Well, because she is very much Jewish in the sense of being very social minded and the equality of for poor people and for workers, and so and very much very Jewish values.
Okay, Andrea, are you writing down these choices?
Yes, actually I am.
Good. You still want you to do that job. You do it so well. Excellent. So it's called Cinderella's what?
Rebel Cinderella.
Rebel Cinderella. Okay. All right. Anybody, any other ideas?
Okay, I don't know anything about this book, but someone who highly recommended it. It's called The Last Kabbalist of Lisbon.
Oh, yes.
Are you familiar with it?
I read it. It's a wonderful book. Go ahead.
Oh. Richard Zimler is the author, and it's a mystery, apparently, that takes place in Lisbon.
During a
during
plague.
the 16th century in Lisbon. And it's a lot about Jews who had to convert to Christianity and their experiences in their life.
Have you read it, or you just?
No, I just got it.
I read it a long time ago. I don't remember it very well, but I remember liking it.
The person who recommended it to me is, I mean, somebody whose taste, I mean, we share books from time to time, and she liked it a lot.
It's good, but the writing is.
He had read it a long time ago also, but she gave it to me.
Oh, okay. The title is The Last what? Cavalier?
The Last Kabbalist of Lisbon.
Kabbalist.
Lauren read it too. He said that the story is great, but the writing is mediocre.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh. Well, he has to come to the book club the next time to read it.
Okay. Well, I don't like mediocre writing.
I liked it, but I don't remember.
I'd like to throw out this the Dahlia Sofer's first novel, the Septembers of Shiraz. She grew up in an Iranian Jewish family, and after the revolution, when she was 11 years old, her family came to the United States. And this is an autobiographical novel about a Jewish family caught up in the revolution and then coming to the United States and things that go on there. It's a novel, but it has a lot of autobiographical elements. Dahlia Sofer just came out with a new novel, which was on the front page of the New York Times Book Review last week. But much more, as I understand it, a very serious novel about the Iranian Revolution and its aftermath. This is her first novel, and I haven't read it. I really can't speak to it, but I do think that it's probably a little better written than The Last Kabbalist of Zimler's book. But Last Kabbalist was a very absorbing story. I don't know if it is about more periods than just one period, but it seems to me that part of it took place during the Napoleonic period. So anyway.
And why wouldn't you recommend the newer book she wrote?
It's a very, first of all, it's not clear to me that it's very much a Jewish book. It's about the tragedy of the Iranian Revolution. It's about a young man who is autistic, and he gets and over the years he becomes an apparatchik for the Iranian regime. So it's not especially as Jewish a book, I think, and also it's a very serious major novel. and it got that front page of the New York Times Book Review treatment. And I don't know if we would be ready to tackle it
Yeah.
because of
It
its
would be the lighter
seriousness.
one. I'm in the
Yeah.
mood for something.
No,
a
I
little lighter.
agree. I
Well,
agree.
I
Something
had-
lighter.
I wanted to suggest an escapist book on the biography of Rabbi Akiva by Barry Holtz. And we had such a good time having the author come. I was wondering maybe I could get Barry Holtz to come to the.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just, I think of that as escapist. Reading. And I like those biographies of the Yale series, although I think we have a lot of good suggestions. And how many do we have
Barry
now?
Holtz, a longtime old friend of Sherry's, is a very reputable
And
scholar
it
and
is
educator.
true, right? Yeah.
So presumably it's a good book. Some of these Jewish Life series books, they're relatively short, and I felt like the Ben Gurion book had too little detail about Ben Gurion's life. But I don't know that they have quite as much detail about Akiva that we might lose in this format. So those are good reasons for choosing that book.
I've got only 3 down because I missed something here. I've got Rebel Cinderella, The Last Kabbalist of Lisbon, and the Septembers of Shiraz.
And this is Rabbi Akiva.
It's a
biography from the Jewish Lives series, Sherry?
Yes.
By Barry Holtz.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any book other than the Jewish series about Maimonides? He seems
Yes,
to
there's a wonderful biography by Sherwin Newland. In
Yeah.
the same series.
In the
It's
Jewish
wonderful.
Lives series.
I would be happy to read that again.
What book, what is that?
It's the biography of Maimonides by
Oh,
Sherwin. Yeah.
I think I have that. There's also, apparently there's a new Gluckle of Hamlin. There's a new version of the Gluckle of Hamlin.
That sounds like a great idea, reading about
That
her.
is supposed to be very good. It has a lot more detail. Apparently the old one was, doesn't have as much detail.
This is a Jewish woman who lived, I guess, in the 1700s or the 1600s and wrote a journal in Yiddish about her life. She was a merchant. She wrote very, very beautifully and sharply about the society that she lived in. Gluckle of Hamlin.
Well, these are all wonderful. I'm sorry, Dina. Go ahead.
No, a friend, some of you might know, Deanna Mirsky, recently went to a talk by a woman who has, I don't know, she apparently is, she likes this book a lot and she talks about it. Her name, I don't know her name either. She's going to be the new head librarian at Brandeis, and she's been talking about it in different venues. And maybe we could get her to come to talk to us.
Maybe that would make a good schmooze and learn. And then we could decide if we want to read the book.
Maybe. Yeah.
Okay, well, we have some great suggestions here. I think we have more than we can.
Brooklyn of Hamlin, I didn't get how to spell this.
Gluckl.
L. Okay.
Okay. Hamlin.
And that's by who?
It's by her.
It's her writing. Yeah.
It's a woman's memoir. She wrote it contemporaneously about her life.
Yeah.
It's actually a journal, I guess.
But someone must have done the translation.
Yes.
Yes, it was translated to English from the Someone translated it into Hebrew and then someone translated it from Hebrew into English, apparently.
Probably was in Yiddish and then in.
It was initially in Yiddish, but then someone this is a translation of a Hebrew translation.
Okay.
So just wondering, of all these suggestions, thinking about how we're all feeling now, could we have some ranking of uplifting? Of
Yeah,
any of this uplifting? Because
right.
I would like
I would appreciate a very humorous.
Yeah.
more uplifting anything in the more positive vein, I think,
Okay.
right now.
Yes, ditto,
if you-
ditto.
If you want something that's a little more humorous, I can recommend Joseph Heller's novel about King David, which
That
is called
doesn't
God
sound
Knows.
fun.
What? God
That
Knows.
doesn't sound uplifting.
Well, it's humorous. Let me tell you, it's quite humorous.
It's
He
not
basically-
uplifting, not uplifting.
Well,
But
Of the groups.
I think the Septembers of Shiraz will be an uplifting book because it has some interesting plot elements that make it kind of a mystery story in itself. And I mean, it's true that the Last Kabbalist of Lisbon is a relatively lachrymose story, as I recall it.
Okay, we don't want
How
that.
about the life of Rabbi Akiva? That's a-
Yeah, the Rabbi Akiva. Remember how he died, but the rest of his life.
We know
wasn't so
about
bad.
that. So sad.
Wouldn't,
All right,
wouldn't Rose Stokes be uplifting? I mean, she did all these great things.
Yeah, that would be uplifting. That would be uplifting for sure.
Wait a minute here.
All right,
Well-
are we ready for the vote?
Yes.
Oh, this discussion has complicated our list considerably.
Well, how are we going to vote? Particularly,
How many are on the list? It feels
Yeah,
like.
Let's have Andrea read.
Why
the-
don't you take the Last Kabbalist of Lisbon off the list?
I think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Gone. Anything else that should be gone? How about Rabbi Akiva?
No,
Yeah,
there's nothing
no,
wrong with
I-
Rabbi
Well,
Akiva.
right now, that's too depressing.
Rabbi Akiva, you want on? Are we talking about the same person?
I think we should leave all the books on and then just vote and everybody
Yeah,
decides
okay.
for themselves.
Okay.
How is Jonathan going to vote? He has to vote by chatting.
Oh, he can chat. Oh, no, let's see. No mic to everyone. Here's somebody. Portnoy's complaint for uplifting book.
Yeah,
All right.
sure.
Who is that there? Is that Sam? Portnoy's complaint for an uplifting book. Oh, whoever
Oh,
Mike is has a
heavens.
great sense of humor. Okay, is this a serious suggestion? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
All right, shoot, go ahead, Andrea.
Okay, this is what we now have 7.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, so people should kind of say, don't do this or don't do that. Okay, we have Rebel Cinderella, The Last Kabbalist of Lisbon, The Septembers of Shiraz, Rabbi Akiva, Maimonides, Buchel of Hamlin, and God Knows.
God knows.
Yeah, by Joseph.
Oops. sorry.
Oh.
Now, are there any ones that, well, let's vote. Vote for 2.
How are we going to do that?
You're going to count.
Are we going to do it by raising our hands?
No,
Well, there is a way we can raise our hands. And Sherry could then
Go down the
tabulate.
list and Jim is going to tell me how many there are.
No.
I can tell you.
Can,
How will I vote? Because I'm not visible.
Yeah, how do,
But you can speak.
Who was that?
Jonathan.
Mark,
Wow, all right.
Yeah. Not visible, so how will I vote? I can speak. I mean, I can talk, but
There you go.
yeah.
No, we'll ask you your vote. Okay, well, just read number 1. I'll write down the votes, okay? And
we could vote by raising our hands. There's a raise your hand feature.
Except me, okay. Just,
well,
No?
if you want to try to do that, you go to manage participants And then, no, it just doesn't come up.
Can we just raise our hands like this?
No, just say what you
I don't
want.
see it.
We know
Okay.
the voices. Just tell me who wants what. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
all right,
be
okay.
able to tell.
Yeah, you tell me.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so Rebel Cinderella, The Last Kabbalist of Lisbon, The Septembers of Shiraz, Rabbi Akiva, Maimonides, Gluckle of Hamlin, and God Knows by Heller. That's 7 in all. And we vote 2. Okay.
Are we
Okay.
voting once?
I'm just seeing.
No, so read the book, read the title of the book, and just raise your hand in front of your video, and then we'll ask the people who don't have videos, okay?
But but are we raising our hand for any book we want at the
No,
first time?
2 books. 2 books.
He's got, Andrea's, listen to, Andrea's going to read the title of the book.
Yeah.
You're voting for that book, raise your hand. And those who cannot, who have no video, will just tell me their vote, okay?
And of course, we're allowed to vote for 2 and only 2 books.
Vote for 2, not just allowed, but we're voting for 2 books, right?
Do this. See?
Okay, the first is Rebel Cinderella.
Okay, so that's 2 votes for Rebel Cinderella. And Andrea, did you vote for it? Oh, that's 3 votes so far. Okay.
No, I didn't vote for
And
that.
Andrea, did you vote for it?
No.
Okay, Jonathan? We don't know how he's voting. No, Mike? You want to put in your chat? No, Mike? Marcia, what is your vote? Are you voting?
No, I'm not voting for that.
Okay.
Next book.
Wait a minute, so that's a total of how many, Andrea?
2.
3.
3. 3.
Oh, 3.
Okay, good. Next book. Next book is what?
The Last Kabbalist of Lisbon.
Okay, raise your hand. Okay, so far nobody. Anybody who is not seen? Let's see. No, Mike, if you want to chat in. And Marcia?
No.
No. Okay, so that's out. We're gonna scratch that out.
Okay.
Okay, number 3.
So, 3rd is Septembers of Shiraz.
Okay, so we've got 3 votes showing. 1, 2, 3.
We've got
Yes.
4 votes showing. 4
5
votes showing.
showing.
And
Every.
okay, that's
Yes.
5 votes.
5 votes?
Yep.
Okay, I've got 5. I wrote down 5. Okay.
Good.
Rabbi Akiva.
That's me. That's 2 showing. Anybody else? Okay, that's 2.
Okay, next is Maimonides.
Maimonides.
Me, I'm 1.
I'll go for that. And
Me
that's
too. Yes.
3.
3.
Me too.
Maimonides is 3.
Marshall.
Okay, then Gluckle of Hamlin. I hope I say that right. I do that.
Okay, so that's, wait a minute, how many times have you voted here?
Once so far.
Okay, good. All right, so that's 1 vote.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And number 7?
7 is God Knows by Heller.
Now that's 1 vote. Okay.
Okay, now the top 2 are Septembers of Shiraz. Oh, you have a tie between Maimonides and Rebel Cinderella.
Right.
What?
So we've got 3 books actually we're gonna have to vote on to narrow it down because the 2.
Okay, then we
Mhm,
vote for 3 and see what happens.
right,
Okay, so
Vote for one of the 3, is that it?
correct.
correct. Okay, so the first one is Rebel Cinderella.
Right, Rebel Cinderella, so that's, we got 2 votes?
Yeah.
2 votes, 3 votes?
3.
3 votes, right? Marcia?
No.
No, okay, so we got 3 votes for Rebel Cinderella,
Yep.
okay?
Okay, and the next 3 is Maimonides.
Yes.
I,
1 for Maimonides.
so that's 2 for Maimonides. Marcia said it too, also.
Okay, 2 for Maimonides.
2 for Maimonides.
And the Septembers of Shiraz.
Right.
Yes, I had voted for that.
3, 4.
4.
Okay, now everybody voted once this time, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
now
All right, September's of Shiraz wins.
Septembers of Shiraz, yeah, and Rebel Cinderella are the 2.
No.
No,
Oh,
September.
What?
We were supposed to just vote once this time.
Yeah.
So September of Shiraz was the winner,
Yes.
Okay.
right? Do we all agree on that?
Yes.
yeah, it had 4 votes
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
by Dahlia Sofer, Sofer.
Sofer.
Do we have a date?
No, we don't. We need a date.
But we could get together on, what is it, June 14th? That's Sherry's birthday, though, you know.
That's okay. Wait, let me check the calendar.
Okay. Okay, now, what date?
Yeah, that June 14th looks good because we have Schmooze and Learn on the 7th and Schmooze and Learn on the 21st. So the 14th will be good.
You should tell them what we have in store on those dates.
It's also Father's Day.
What, the 14th?
Oh, no, the
No, no,
21st.
Father's Day is the
The 14th.
21st.
The 14th is.
So let's go for June 14th. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Yes, I
Okay,
guess. Yeah.
Father's Day is not a problem for anybody?
No, it's not Father's Day. That's the next week.
It's
Oh,
Flag Day.
It's Flag Day, that's correct.
yeah. And it's Sherry's birthday.
Yeah.
Hey, tomorrow's my birthday.
Oh, is
Oh,
that right?
Andrea, happy birthday
Birthday
to
to
you.
you.
Happy
Happy birthday
Hey.
to you. Happy birthday, Andrea.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday to you.
The question,
That's a coincidence because the day after your birthday is my birthday.
well, Jim.
Oh,
Happy birthday.
I realize none of us are going to blow out candles anymore.
I know. Now, listen, the thing is, my nephew always has taken me out to dinner. I love my nephew. But the question now is, where should he go to pick up dinner? And does everybody have, if you understand.
Uh-huh.
Any restaurants are open.
It's tough.
For takeout.
Yes, for
Yeah.
takeout.
Great. Oh, Jonathan just sent me an email that many thanks. He heard everything. So that's great. That's good.
So are we meeting at 7:30?
7:30, same time, same station, same everything. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
davening at 7. Davening at 7.
Okay, thank you,
Well, this is great.
everybody.
It
Thank
was
you,
wonderful
Sherry.
to be together again.
Oh,
Thanks all for coming.
thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Good night. Be well,
Good night.
everybody.
Yeah.